everyone. I'm Robert Drysdale here. You're back. We are back with the Breaking the Guard podcast with my good friend and co-host David Avalon. And today we have a very special guest, good friend, former training partner, former teammate, BJJ legend, open weight champion, 2 times open weight champion, Hall of Famer, Rodrigo Comprido Medeiros, also just commonly known as Comprido. Comprido, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. So thanks for the invitation. It's great to be here with you guys, and let's see where this leads us.
All right, we got some. I know Comprido, like we like to speak some frank opinions on the state of jiu-jitsu and martial arts in the world. So I'm sure this is going to be a fun conversation. But Comprido, I was wondering talk about. Because you were part of the formation of Alliance at a time when it was still Master, right? Even before it was Alliance. It goes way back, right?
More or less. I was the year I started doing jiu-jitsu was the year that the Alliance was put together. And then I was training at the Master Academy. And then I saw that, but with the eyes of a white belt. And then I was always close to the coaches and the people who are the founders of Alliance, so I have a good inside information, but I was not part of anything. I was just starting at the time.
So you who would you consider to be your jiu-jitsu instructor at that time?
At the time it was Jacaré, was just when I started, and then Leo Veira was the instructor on the academy. But I could never consider Leo my teacher because we are such a good friends. I knew Leo since I was 9 years old, so it's really hard, to have this personal relationship mixed with the instructor and student relationship, so I always see him as a friend and never as a coach, but I learned a lot from him.
So instead of telling us what you've learned from Leo, tell us a Leo Veira story that no one's ever heard before. Give us some childhood story between you guys. I know you guys got some good stories.
Childhood story. Man, he gets so pissed when I start to tell his stories.
That's the whole point. I know that.
But I like to tell the stories when he's present, like that. I like to embarrass him.
We'll send him the link. I'll make sure he gets the link.
Man, a childhood story that doesn't embarrass him. Okay. Let's go with an easy one. When we were kids, we used to play on the block, right? So you know where I live, where I used to live in Brazil. So it's a block away from the beach. And then we knew everybody on that block, so all the kids, there's a lot of jiu-jitsu people who came from that street. So maybe on the spring, I don't know which time of the year, the trees get full of the amêndoa. It's not almond seed, but like is a big seed here, this big, and then you used to play battles on the street, and then obviously people are passing and get hit by, and like when we hit somebody, we make sure we hide, and then this day we hit somebody, and Leo is on the top of the tree, and then this guy walks to him, really serious, and then he said to him, "Desta árvore não chamou guarda." The guy was American, right? So, and then he speak with this broken Portuguese and asking him to come down to the tree or he's gonna call the police. And Leo was trying to hiding, but he has nowhere to go. He was on the top of the tree, and the guy yelled on him and stuff. And the moment the guy turned his back and started to walk away, we are behind the cars, and then we start throw stuff on the car again, just for him to blame Leo again. But this time Leo ran away,
Oh man, good.
But I don't know, man. It's hard to tell. I don't know. When somebody asks me to tell a story, it's hard to remember funny one. It's the time that he killed the fish, like it was on the pot. It was one of the in Brazil. It's very common have those carp fishes. Okay. On the buildings, like They look good. It's these little pools with these carp fishes. And then it was me, Marcelo Cazuza, the guy who teaches with me here, and then a friend of ours there, and Leo, right? So for whatever reason, when you tap on the water, the carp jumps, you know. So Leo tap on the water when the carp jumps, he kicked the carp, and then obviously the carp died, right? So the doorman calls the police. So suddenly the police arrive, you know, and then by this time they have the carp in a bag, you know. So the police arrive and then they said, "Hey, dude, I'm gonna arrest you guys. You guys killed the carp, you know, like you guys are trying to steal the carp." And I said, no, the carp is fine. The carp is just resting. I can prove you the carp is just resting. And then he put the carp on the water and he pushed, but the carp turns belly up, you know. And then the police officer look at him, dude. The carp is done. I think you guys gonna have to come with me, you know, like.
Oh, funny, man.
Oh my God.
But yeah, man, you guys got a lot of history, and like it was a very, very important period in the history of jiu-jitsu. Like we already know that scene in in Ipanema / Copacabana South Zone, right, Zona Sul, has entered the history books of jiu-jitsu because so many of the dominant schools today came out of that region. Like if you look at the best Brazilian jiu-jitsu teams today in the world, they can all trace back their lineage to that small little neighborhood of Rio de Janeiro. So maybe talk a little bit about what like the jiu-jitsu scene was like in the Zona Sul, like growing up in the 90s, until like, and then from there we can kick off into your career because I'm a little more familiar with that. But I wanted to hear what the scene was like, if it was competitive. I know there's a huge rivalry between Brazilian jiu-jitsu and luta livre. What was it like before the jiu-jitsu boom or as the jiu-jitsu boom was occurring and Royce Gracie was winning?
Yeah, the rivalry between jiu-jitsu and luta livre doesn't take place too much where we used to live, you know, because the guys from luta livre normally they are more towards Botafogo, Flamengo, you know, they live around, the Rio Sul Mall on that area. So it's a little bit for the Rio standards, that's a little bit farther. So and then the things happen towards that side or in Barra. You know, the fight between Rickson and Hugo happened on Pepe, on Barra da Tijuca. So when I was growing up, Leo was already doing jiu-jitsu way younger. And then me and my friend, most of my friends besides him, we started doing like kickboxing, box Thailandese. I had done Taekwondo for a bit, and that's more or less when the first Vale Tudo happened. And then we said, yeah, fuck this jiu-jitsu guys. If you guys like to hug men, you guys are homosexuals, blah, blah, blah. All those jokes. And then the Luta Libre guys gotten bit. And, said, okay, these guys are tough, the jiu-jitsu guys. But it was not my thing, Suddenly, all my friends left the kickboxing and started doing jiu-jitsu. Some went to training at Bolão Academy, what is one of the students of Carson Grace, and some went to the Jacaré Academy, So sometime later, my cousin Mauricinho asked me to join him on the jiu-jitsu. And then since that point, I never managed to train with my friends because they just went for a different academy. So it was not okay at that time. Doesn't matter if the guy is your childhood friend, you will not training with him. He's a friend of mine that I just went to training with him last year. I know the guy since I'm 9 years old. The guy is a black belt, like now he doesn't do this professional. He's a judge now. But he came visit last year. It's the first time that I trained with him. And Marcelo, the Marcelo Cazuza, the guy who teaches at my academy, he is one of my friends who went to teach at Bolão, And then I just went to watch one of his class to visit his academy, maybe 10 years ago, And then the opportunity presents and he moved here, but it was very competitive. I will not say we will not speak with the guys from another academy, but it was not the way it is today, definitely. It's in no way you would consider go training with somebody who's not member of a team.
Yeah, that sounds very familiar to me. I know when I started training, I was probably around. I started training around '99 when I started doing mixed martial arts and all that after wrestling. But I remember my brother and I were winning Naga tournaments, and we got invited by the Severo brothers, Conan and Marcus, to their gym. And this is like 2000. And I remember going in there, it was like going into like a gang initiation, because and I'm like 18 years old, my brother's 19, and it's a bunch of 30-year-old guys. They're all tattooed up, and everybody's like looking like real mean,
Like Robert, right?
yeah, exactly. And I was like, what the hell, man? Like it was very unfriendly. And and that was very familiar. Like most of the times that you ever went to cross train, it was like that. The it was like going into gang territory. So I think now, like what you're saying is very true. Like nowadays, it's like, oh, you can go anywhere to train. It's no big deal. There's no like, there's not as much political problems or like people like, oh, you're from that team, I'm gonna kick your ass like right now. So it's interesting that has changed. I wonder it's because now the internet has made accessing all sorts of people easier, or I don't know what you would think. Like what has made that barrier come down where before cross training was such a frown upon thing, and now it's standard.
Yeah, I think the access of the information is one thing because look, if I'm training with Robert every day, right? So most likely I know which are Robert's weaknesses, you know. So and then I don't wanna other people to know that. Robert will not want other people to know that. So he will not like that I was going to train with somebody who might fight him. That's how we think at the time, and that's why people do not compete against teammates. And then is no chance that I will ever compete against a teammate. I closed brackets with Robert before, um, but that's the thing. I know stuff about him, and he knows stuff about me that we want to keep a secret. If we have to fight, he's gonna use his knowledge because then he's gonna have to beat me, and then make it easier for other guys. That's the initial thing. And on top of that, I feel very uncomfortable to have to facing my friends. If it's today, somebody asks me, "Do you want to fight Robert?" I will say no. I pay you to fight Robert? I said no. He's my friend. Uh, I get together with him and we fight you.
I appreciate that a lot because I know I'm the same way. I know some people don't like when teams close out, but I feel that when I'm competing, I mean, we spoke with Laval yesterday. I said the same thing. For me, I'm always trying to go out there and kill the guy in front of me with whatever rule set they have. I don't want to do that against my brother. Like there's enough gym wars that we can have that we don't need to do it out in public. Especially like if you're thinking like an MMA or whatnot, you don't want to bust someone's nose or break a leg or anything like that with a teammate. So
Yeah, especially when you can avoid. When you're in a MMA, you cannot avoid that most of the times. Like it is a way to avoid, but it is a point that you cannot do anymore. It's two guys uh, fighting for the belt. It's
yeah,
hard to avoid that, but as much as you can avoid it, and we do a amateur sport, like or when we talk about jiu-jitsu, it's an amateur sport. I pay my registration, and if I choose not to fight a teammate, that's my decision, and I never fight for real against a teammate. I have a couple fights that I have to do to pretend, like Abu Dhabi, I have to fight Damian once, and we could not go away of that. I have to fight Roleta in Abu Dhabi as well. What's not my teammate, but is another story, on the time that people close the bracket. Uh, uh, I have to fight Fabio Gurgel one time, like because it was on TV Esfirra, but it's all fake fights.
There's a long tradition in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. We're going to talk a little about a documentary of fake fights. But like the fake fights have actually played a huge role in making Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu possible. We're going to make that case because the people could not sell fights to the audience unless they were entertaining. So it was the only way they had to survive and allow time for BJJ to exist was orchestrating fights, right? Which I thought was interesting. But yeah, Comprido, I mean, I remember when I started training, the very first magazine, one of the first magazines I bought had you on the cover finishing Roleta and a toe hold. And like right after that, you on the cover with Leo Leite, you had closed the bracket for the Open, right? It might have been the next year. I can't remember now, but you're one of the first names that popped into, like that were part of like my idea of competitive jiu-jitsu. In those early days, it was you're one of the first names that popped up. And I remember you went for a toe hold on Coletta from open guard, right, which is a pretty standard move to go for. It's not quite a 50-50 if I remember, but it looked almost like a toe hold from 50-50 from standing. And I remember like a lot of people like a little shocked about that because we're talking 99 here, right? If memory serves me well. And at that time in Brazil, especially Brazil, going for a footlock was like it wasn't illegal, but like in Thai boxing, if you teep someone to the face, it's like blasphemy. Like people want to attack you. Like they have signs at gyms in Thailand that say no teep to the face. You can shin me in the eye, no problem. But if you put the sole of your foot on my face, I will kill you. And footlocks were a little bit like that during that period in Brazil. And in some corners, it still might be. It's changed, almost completely. But there might be some of that left somewhere. But talk a little bit about that. Like because like there's this whole discourse today that goes on about people ignoring half the body, right? We were ignoring half the body. I'm like, no, we're not. Like 99, we were, Comprido's winning the world title with a toe hold. That's just not true. But talk a little bit about that. Like, how your interpretation of jiu-jitsu at the time compared to what the common perception was of how someone should fight.
Just gonna go back a little bit. A few things that you had said just to make clear. The fake fights from the fake fights I make. I never make a fake fight for being interesting, and I understand what you're saying about the documentary. The only one that people think until this day that was real was me and Roleta. All the other fake fights I did, everybody knew was fake. And Damian, people pretend they don't know is fake. Like on the Abu Dhabi, from the Abu Dhabi people. It was actually the year to go to the tournament on the year that you won, right?
Yeah. I remember that. Yeah, I remember that. Now I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so it was semifinal. We could not avoid that. And at that time, Damian was training much better than me. I could even actually at that point go to him and say, hey, I'm the older guy and you give the victory to me, but wasn't right. He is the one who was better. If we fight for real, he probably would beat me. And then he went there and he did a great tournament, and then talking about the footlocks. So toe holds are old when I was young. Okay. When I started doing jiu-jitsu, that's very old. But people see that as a cheap technique, a low-level technique. If you are not very good, you would attack footlocks. It's a way that don't develop your jiu-jitsu, because if you keep attacking footlock, you don't worry about passing the guard and blah, blah, blah. And then I saw people throwing bottles on the mat. I saw black belts finishing each other and then being booed and stuff like that. And I had done some footlocks before. On the final of a brown belt nationals, I finished Chuchu Carlos Sherman with a toe hold. Same thing. I actually finished him twice with the same toe hold because he yelled. He said, ah! And then I let him go. I released the pressure and I said, tap. And he said, no, I did not tap. I said, dude, you tap. I said, no, I didn't. I said, okay. I looked at the referee. The referee said, keep going. So then I popped his foot. So, but it obviously don't attract any attention because it was just a brown belt finishing another brown belt. The only reason that thing attracts so much attention is because it was the final of the Worlds. I was fighting against. I had fought on that year the two guys on the final. I fought Zemari on the semifinal, the champion of the year before, and Roleta was the second place on the year before, 98. And that was part of my game plan. I, of course, never thought it will happen the way it happened so fast. And on top of to be this a submission on the last fight of the tournament is the first time somebody ever had a submission on the black belt final, and was the fastest submission in Jiu-Jitsu World Championship finals until last year. So that's why gives so much momentum. But even heel hooks like Dean Lister do this for so long. Eric Paulson way before Dean.
Yeah, even the Luta Livre guys in Brazil did it too.
The Luta Livre, Toho it was common from the guys from Luta Livre. Very common from the guys from Luta Livre.
But no, that's interesting because I remember well that episode with the Roleta, and it was a big bull. I didn't know that was the fastest submission until last year. You said who did Mike Musumeci beat you?
Mike beat me.
Yeah,
with another foot lock.
Yeah, another foot lock. So it's interesting, huh? Quick submissions for sure. Dave, I want to I don't know if you want to ask anything about this period again, about the full lock conversation. I want to get into some of the more, recent topics, and some of the more what's going on in jiu-jitsu today. And I don't know if you wanted to,
Yeah, I know you were mentioning Dean Lister, and I know you've trained and coached people in MMA. I think Dean was one of them, correct? And
I coached Dean for ADCC.
Okay.
When he fought Jean-Jacques.
Okay. And I know you've also coached famously Brock Lesnar. So yes. I know that must be interesting because he's such a big dude. How was that like? And did you find him to be receptive towards learning? Or?
Yes, always being very. Actually, it was much better training with him. I will not say easier, but much better training with him because he's the one guy who did not try to destroy me, to rip my head from my body. Every single time we were facing each other was always about to beat each other, but on the challenging ourselves. Make sure we are getting better. Make sure he was doing something better today than he was doing yesterday. And every time he got me something he knew, I would be really upset, and I will keep trying to get him back. And then the other guys, many times they just want to prove themselves, and a bunch of heavy wrestlers, high level wrestlers. So many times go with the Brock was the best of the day, because the other guys come crazy, and not that they disregard in hurting you or not. Like, you're a wrestler, you know how it is, wrestlers training hard all the time, and sometimes if you're not prepared, I have to do adjustment because on the first trains I didn't know really well, so much pressure so fast, I said, what the heck, man, come on, let's know each other first,
Yeah, there's no adjustment period, and wrestlers is all spaz right from the beginning, just going nuts. I know. I think that throws a lot of people off because the first coach that I trained under, this guy Randy, when we trained my brother, got into MMA first, and I was still wrestling. And when I trained with him, my brother was tapping me with arm bars or mini chokes because I didn't know what was going on. And he got me pissed. I'm okay, I'm gonna go. Who do I train with? And he goes, oh, this is my coach. And when I went with his coach, I actually tapped the coach the first time. I got him with the Americana, and because I was just going and going nuts, and I caught him. And then I was like, oh, this guy's not that good, man. Like, if I tapped him the first time, how is he going to teach me? But then I learned shortly because he got pissed and then he kicked my ass all over the place. But I think it's just a different intensity. Especially, I think, earlier, jiu-jitsu guys were a lot more calm. When they were trained, it was more technical, whereas wrestlers are always just about exploding and going wild.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I also learned in this period of time how technical wrestling is. You cannot do those techniques. You cannot pick somebody up the way these guys pick if you don't have the perfect technique. And it's the same technique on the end of the day. I believe wrestling and jiu-jitsu are the same fight with different rules.
Yes.
But the body movement, your body gonna work the same way when you're practicing wrestling or when you're practicing jiu-jitsu. But the rules make wrestling a much more intense fight. It's much shorter. They stop all the time and restart. So you have to go with intensity. You cannot be lazy on wrestling.
I was just gonna say that it's in the wrestling's nature to be spazzy and aggressive, and because just for exactly the reason you just gave, the short rounds, right? And actually, this has been single-handedly, me and Dave have discussed this before, but one of the biggest advantages wrestlers have had in MMA, because the MMA format is very close to wrestling in that regard, right? Because you get like 5 minutes of absolute intensity, you get a little break, and another 5 minutes of high intensity, and it's you need to have that sort of level of aggression in order to fight well. You know, scrambles, you can't afford to lose a scramble in an MMA fight. You might not have another chance, right? So I always find that training with wrestlers is fun, because I like to train like that, or at least I used to. Like, I
Yeah, I
like
know
going
that.
to war. Like, I never liked rolling for fun. It's never been fun to me. It's only fun if, you know, we're trying to kill each other. But all wrestlers, from my experience, train like that. 100% of them, high intensity, balls to the wall, kill, 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 which makes it fun, but at the same time very damaging to the body. Like, I think that in terms of longevity, that's not a good formula.
And then for us, from the jiu-jitsu perspective, sometimes when the guy come like that, you know, because it's still, Robert is very intense, but it's not the same intensity that a wrestler, you know. So it's almost, I will not say offensive, but you think the guy really dislikes you, you know, and he attack you on that way. But it's actually the opposite. Is harder the guy attack you, is more respect than he's showing, because he said, man, I have to go with everything I got, or this guy gonna beat me up. You know, if you go with a wrestler and he's playing all loose the way I play, is that the guy completely disregard for me. He not even want to be in front of me, you know.
Exactly.
So, and then you, like, working with those wrestlers, working with the guys from Minnesota, helped me to understand a bunch of stuff, you know, to separate a bunch of myths that we believed, you know, that wrestlers are not technical, that they will get tired. No, the wrestlers will not get tired. You know, like, those guys are super athletes, you know. But it was a good period of my life. I learned a lot, and I have lots of fun.
So, Comprido, let me ask you, man. I remember, like, when I started training, like you talked about jiu-jitsu, gi, no gi, MMA, it was all the same thing. We didn't make a distinction between jiu-jitsu and vale tudo. Like, if you did one, you did the other. It was almost like the same sport. It's in the sense where clearly the rules were different, but if you liked one, you liked the other. If you followed one, you followed the other. Like, if you bought a magazine that talked about jiu-jitsu, the next article was about vale tudo, and like no one thought that was a problem with that. Today, we have very specialized press, we have very specialized, events. We have very specialized rules, and we are watching sort of, what used to be one thing turn into, well, I like gi with these rules, I like no gi with those rules. And MMA, it's been its own thing for a long time. We'll discount that, but how do you feel like? And I think that's a reflex of growth. Maybe you agree with me. Like, as it grows, maybe that's the natural tendency, is for people to become more specialized. But talk about, like, I mean, you're able to witness firsthand not only the jiu-jitsu boom of the 90s, but also its state today, right? Like, you've been in the sport for like 30 years. So, what's your perception of the evolution of jiu-jitsu at becoming a worldly sport from 90s to today?
Man, that's a blast, you know. That's all we wanted, you know. Like, when I start jiu-jitsu, was no perspective to have somebody just making his living of competing in jiu-jitsu in any format that you want, you know. There's no money at all, you know. I get money, I get paid very few times. um on early on my career, I was talking with Libor, you know, what is one generation before me. First time he got paid was in Abu Dhabi, you know. What is also the first time that I fought a grappling rules, you know, no gi. You know, now it's impossible you get somebody just showing up in Abu Dhabi, you know, a jiu-jitsu guy, first tournament, no gi, Abu Dhabi. This doesn't happen. I even have a tournament that one what looks like a MMA, that I have a gi, the other guy has no gi, but that is with kicks and slaps allowed. So I had two fights like that before Abu Dhabi. But we used to training, you know, thinking about jiu-jitsu. It's not thinking about these separations is just for marketing, in my opinion. You know, like when you say, I do self-defense jiu-jitsu, I do no-gi jiu-jitsu, I do gi jiu-jitsu, I do competition, I do invisible, I do green, I do whatever other name, Gracie jiu-jitsu, and that's all jiu-jitsu, American jiu-jitsu. You know, like that's all a way to label something. You know, to benefits you, to bring something that you, a part of the sport that you do well, or that makes sense for you to advertise yourself on that place. You know, but jiu-jitsu is jiu-jitsu. You should to be able to do self-defense, to do a basic MMA. Today is impossible. You know, so you take a guy on jiu-jitsu, as before when Royce started to fight, you could take a raw jiu-jitsu guy and throw inside the cage, and he will do well. Or a wrestler or a boxer, you know, that was okay at that time. Today, doesn't matter. You take the best wrestler in the world. If he doesn't have a training for MMA, he's going to be destroyed. Same thing with the best boxer. Same thing with the best jiu-jitsu fighter. If he doesn't train the other arts, he will be smoked. And you know, the jiu-jitsu become a lot of fragmented on this way. I hate that there's so many rules. You know, it's much easier if you follow just one rule. I believe the IBJJF have the best rules, the best rule set. You know, but on my time, you will be fighting gi or no gi or whatever. You know, now it's people who only fight no gi, people who only fight with gi. You know, becomes a lot of more specific. What I don't really think is bad at all. You know, I think that's as everything. You know, uh, a tennis player still play tennis on the dust and on the grass, but he probably going to be better in one of those two, right?
Sure, yeah. Sure. No, I think, like you're saying, is just well, a lot of the labeling, of course, I think is marketing. People trying to create a legacy for themselves by establishing their own sect. You know, like when you say Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, it's to say the Gracie name will carry on, and that's their contribution to society or whatnot. Not as much as like it's a very different style. The one thing I thought you were funny when you talk about self-defense jiu-jitsu, I always found that like very silly. Like someone go, "Oh, what's a good art for self-defense?" Well, mixed martial arts is self-defense. If you can fight in the cage, you can fight in the street. You know, yeah. I mean, minus the eye gouging or the.
I make a distinction that self-defense is when you can protect yourself against somebody who doesn't know nothing. And then when you do MMA or Vale Tudo, whatever, I still call Vale Tudo all the time because that's the name I learned. But that's when you have to prove yourself against somebody as good as you or even better than you. Yeah. You know, because a lot of these techniques that we learn from self-defense, they are great if you're doing it with somebody who never, you know, training anything, you know. But if I try to do half of that stuff, will not work against you because you have such a good base standing that, you know, those half-ass techniques will not work. So I have to be much more specialized to do that, and that's when I put on the category of MMA. Of course, yeah, if you do MMA, you don't need self-defense, you know.
Yeah,
that's why I say it should not be a little bit fragmented like that. You should learn everything, you know. I'm not saying that in the jiu-jitsu class you're going to learn how to punch perfectly. You're going to learn how to do a double leg the same way wrestlers do. This will never happen, you know. Like you're going to learn to punch perfectly when you learn from a boxer, for somebody who really knows how to do it. You're going to learn how to do the perfect takedown double leg when you learn from a good wrestler. A good take. I have a good. I'm good standing. You know, my judo is pretty good. I training judo a lot, and then I had Leo Leite coming to do a class, online class on my academy for my students yesterday, and I said, Leo, man, I do this style toshi, but that's the way I teach, and I know it's wrong, you know, because I give 3 steps before the technique, and I said, can you show the way you do it? And the guy just do two steps. You know, I'm considering myself a knowledgeable coach. I'm tough to put down. I compete judo a lot, but still my technique is not as perfect as somebody who is specialized in that.
Absolutely. I think that goes, I mean, that's just the law of economics, right? Like we can't be good everywhere, or we can't be experts everywhere. There's always going to be somebody who, if they spend their time in one particular area, they're going to be better than us because they've devoted everything to this, but then they have ignorance in other things. So, I mean, you've been involved with coaching MMA, and I don't know, you see now, like, it looks like jiu-jitsu is having less of a role in MMA now than it historically has, where to me it seems more often than not now we're looking at like boxing fights with some wrestling. And there's few standouts that still are capitalizing on very good jiu-jitsu. But I wonder what you think on that, because keeping that in mind that because that people can't spend their time everywhere, and especially in the fight game, they have to pick their spots. And I think what most coaches are thinking, it's easier, it takes much longer to get really good at jiu-jitsu than it does to become a striker, or even just to have enough wrestling, not to get taken down and basic stuff. What do you think about that?
And not just that the jiu-jitsu is like even wrestling that I think is a pretty complex fight. Jiu-jitsu is much more complex than wrestling. The rules of jiu-jitsu allow so much more than the rules of wrestling allow. And boxing is, man, it's pretty basic. Like you learn all the movements of boxing on your first week, and then you just have to improve the way you perform those movements. In jiu-jitsu, I don't know everything what there is to know in jiu-jitsu. Robert doesn't know, and I don't think nobody in the world knows every single movement in jiu-jitsu. Uh, so it's a lot more complex. And another very important factor that we touched earlier, boxing and wrestling are fights that are not much faster. The rounds are much faster. You have to be pressure right away. Jiu-jitsu, depending who is the fighter, like on my case, I'm the guy who take my time to set up my stuff. I'm kind of a lazy fighter. Uh, I'm not super aggressive. I take my time to set up my stuff. And then a lot of people plays like that. And even the aggressive guys in jiu-jitsu, they look passive if you compare with the intensity of wrestling. So that makes more sense for you to fight on the UFC format. That's 5 minutes. On the Pride, then you have 10 minutes and then 5. Then jiu-jitsu will show up much better. Yeah. And on top of that, if you go to the floor, the other guy doesn't have to follow you, that he can just pull you up. That the format of MMA is to make you fight standing.
One thing that I want to add to that, and I always, when this discussion comes up, I always want to say it. You got to remember, if you're on the bottom, you can't kick, right? If I were in guard and I can kick you in the head, my guard would be 100 times more efficient.
Oh,
you would have a really hard time ground and pounding me if I can shin you in the head from the bottom, right? So like that's one of those things that I should think that should be legal. Like that's my opinion. That should be a legal move because I'm on the bottom. I should be able to kick the person on top, but not everyone agrees.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm all for that. I think the less rules, the better. I find we're doing, I mean, Balato, everything goes, right? I feel it should be the same way. I hate that you can't, as a bottom guy, upkick someone who's on their knees, or like likewise, the guy standing can't stomp on somebody or whatnot. I liked Pride rules the best of any of the rules for that reason. I like the longer round, and I felt that the longer round let grappling matches be better, and it's also a little more realistic. I know fighting is not realistic in a sense in the rules, but it's closer. I hate the idea of someone being saved by the bell. In between rounds. That's like, this. I mean, it breaks the realism, right? Because you're like, if this was a real fight, this would have been over. But you got saved by a sport. Yeah, but I understand you can't do the no time limits anymore because it's not good for TV and whatnot. But there's something to be said about those early UFCs where there were no time limits, no rules,
no weight limit.
No weight limit, and you could grab people by the hair. I think was it like Hoist won against Chemo by grabbing his hair and setting up the triangle. So it's kind of pretty wild. But I always think it's a good thing for the young guys to learn because I know like the younger fighters I haven't watched the early UFCs and like, what, you can do that? I'm like, Yeah, back in the day, these people were crazy.
You could headbutt, like
Yeah.
headbutts, like full on, man.
Well, headbutt's such a powerful weapon, though. Yeah, like
Yeah.
people don't realize it, but like Dan Severn won a lot of fights just by headbutting people.
Look at this right
Man,
here.
Valide.
Talk about a weapon.
Yeah, no, Robert have a big advantage if that was a law.
That's why I've always advocated for it.
But do you know how this Vale Tudo between Jiu-Jitsu and Luta Livre took place, right? So they convinced the biggest TV station in Brazil to show on live, right? So, and it was on the afternoon, I think, if I'm not wrong. So, but they lied. The organizers lied and said that would be open hand or almost like a grappling match, right? So, first fight, Valide and who he fight? And Eugenio. And Valide start to headbutt him and get his face all bloody and start to yell jiu-jitsu, jiu-jitsu, like a slot from the Goonies, And man, that's why this was so good for jiu-jitsu, but also was so bad because that's when they start to call us pit boys and make our image really bad because the executives to the global channel hated jiu-jitsu and MMA for so long. Like it was a Vale Tudo fight, but they see as the jiu-jitsu guy's fault, because
of course.
I think that's a similar thing that happened here in the U.S. when the UFC came out, right? They started calling it human cockfighting and all that,
but I think that was because it was boxing. Boxing try not to give any space, for competition. I don't know if at that time, I assume so. At that time, the WWE would be the biggest competitor of boxing, and then they did not want a third party involved, and then they did everything they could to kill UFC,
Yeah, from my understanding, it was a mix of both the WWE and boxing that didn't like MMA stepping in. And I think one of the reasons, I think it was Anheuser-Busch was a big sponsor of those, or particularly WWE, I believe. And it was actually John McCain that had pushed through the legislation.
Yeah, John McCain.
To get the UFC off, So we have politicians to thank for the current state of MMA, but it's hard to say if it was a good thing or a bad thing. If the sport would have been able to grow in its old format.
Yeah, we're never gonna know. I think on the end of the day turns out well. Really well for the Fertitta, really bad for the Gracies, for Horio, who sold super cheap.
But one thing that I remember well when I first started training and when I first becoming more familiar with MMA, there was one thing that everyone agreed on. Everyone who trained jiu-jitsu and followed UFC back in the late 90s, early 2000s, everyone knew the sport was going to blow up. There was a sense of confidence that MMA was so much more exciting than boxing, that it was just a matter of time before MMA took over. And I'm not sure what the pay-per-view sales are like worldwide between MMA and boxing. I might imagine that MMA has a bigger audience today. I don't know for sure. But I feel very confident in saying that MMA is more interesting for the average viewer.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. I think right now boxing pay-per-views are still bigger, but they're less frequent. Like now, there's so many MMA cards that it's kind of made it harder for them to get those higher pay-per-view numbers because there's so many events to watch. But at the same, I think if you average it out over time, I think, I don't know, we might be in the bubble now with the way social media works. It's sending you what you like, but I can't move away from seeing stuff about MMA. I mean, it's just everywhere. Yeah. I think the fact that you have the UFC, what boxing really doesn't have are like strong organizations that are pumping out events frequently, right? They're usually doing like one-off cards, like, oh, we do a big fight here and then we do a big fight there. Since there isn't like one thing that's constantly moving, there's no momentum going behind it. Like the UFC, every event is essentially building off the previous one. I think
and then boxing, I think, rely a lot on the fighter, and that the UFC create a brand, the UFC, they don't want to promote the fighter as much, you know. It's the UFC champion, not so much the fighter, you know.
Right, exactly, right. Because now it's what you said. It's the UFC champ, you know, and then the sport is called UFC. You know, there's the joke that people say, "Oh, I train UFC," right? But like, but it's a reality because nobody goes, "Oh, I train Golden Boy boxing," right?
Yeah.
So like, boxing is still the sport, whereas UFC has done the job of, like you said, branding itself to be the sport. So it kind of sucks for the fighters because it takes away leverage from them. You know, like the only guy who has like serious clout is Conor McGregor. You know, he's the one guy that essentially has like Mayweather like star power in the UFC.
And but like that was intentional though. I think Dana knew enough from boxing to see that he wanted his organization to be the name. And no fighter up to Conor, you're right, has ever carried enough weight to actually be able to challenge the UFC. Conor has that sort of power, but no one else has ever been able to come close to doing that. It's because Dana has always made sure the UFC. I don't think he could start his own organization and sell the way, you know. I think Conor could probably have like put together an organization to rival the UFC if he fought on it consistently. You know, I don't know. Maybe I'm pushing a little too far, but the UFC definitely is a name that outdoes the name of any fighter out there. Like there's, you know, it's about the UFC. People remember the UFC above any other fighter for sure.
Right. Well, you did make a good point. Brock Lesnar was the original superstar, I would say, before Conor. Whenever Brock came into a fight, like he was able to do whatever he wanted as well.
Yeah, but one of the reasons is because he was before UFC.
Yes.
He was a star before UFC, you know. Not that there's obviously a bunch of national wrestling champions over there and even Olympic champions. But because of the WWE, Brock has so much leverage, you know, he's so well known. And then his behave of either is the way that I want this shit to happen or this shit will not happen, you know. And then he made clear, look, I will do this on these circumstances, you know, kind of what McGregor does. Just that McGregor really enjoyed to be in front of the cameras, and I don't think Brock had so much fun to be in front of the cameras.
Yeah. So I guess bringing this back into grappling, right now we don't really have someone like that. I guess the closest thing we have would probably be Robert's favorite person. It's Gordon Ryan.
Oh yeah. I like his jiu-jitsu. It's just like when he talks, his jiu-jitsu goes down 3 levels. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's funny because I find that jiu-jitsu is in this crossroads, and history does repeat itself, right? Like Jigoro Kano originally moved away from the term jiu-jitsu because he didn't like the association with professional fights, fake fights, the circus. He wanted to distance himself from that idea, right? And, you know, we're watching a huge push, especially in North America, to make jiu-jitsu professional. Maybe it's for the better, but they're really, you know, they're learning from the lessons from pro wrestling and boxing. And it's becoming more and more like pro wrestling and boxing and less like the judo from where it came from, you know? So there's that element. And I don't know. I go back and forth on it. Maybe it's better for people, the fighters. Yeah, they make more money. But I think overall for the sport, we do lose a little bit. I think that we have a lot to learn from judo in the sense of its values and philosophy and respect and all those things that I feel are being lost. They were lost in Brazil and they're further lost as BJJ becomes professionalized, right? I would like to see a going back to our roots and like looking at martial arts as a way of really improving on people, you know. But it's not the position of the zeitgeist, you know. The current moment is one for entertainment at any cost, you know. It's all about entertainment, and everything else kind of takes a back seat to that, you know. But I don't know if long term that's going to stick. I wonder if that's going to be the norm moving forward, or if at some point, you know, people are going to get tired of that and going to go, yeah, man, like jiu-jitsu was better when, you know, we weren't trash talking.
And I think you should trash talk when you don't like the guy. You know, not trash talk for trash talk. Whatever, man.
Yeah.
People do whatever
if
they
it's
have
genuine,
to do.
I'm for it. I agree with you. If it's genuine, I agree with it. But like in MMA, I feel like it rarely is. You know, BJJ is kind of following its coattails.
Yeah, I think it's very easy to spot fake trash talk or just people who are trying to get attention. And I don't know, to me, when I see it, it's very needy. You know, it seems, I don't know, it's very weak to me. I like guys like Damian Maya, you know, that they have, to me, that they're good ambassadors for the sport.
Yeah.
And kind of like what you're saying, Robert, they're a credit to like the virtues of the martial arts training. Because ultimately, the idea behind, I would hope, behind the sport is to get more people behind the movement. Because you know, most of us are gym owners, and we want more students in our gym. At the same time, giving back to the lessons that we've learned to the martial arts. You know, I think we can pose that question to anybody. Like, would you sell your martial arts experience for $10 million or $100 million? And for me, the answer is always no. Right? It's part of who I am now, and it would be something I would hope more people would have. And when we start supporting people by giving them more money or more attention for trash talking or, you know, doing all the crazy stuff that Connor's done, it sends the wrong signal to me. Because as a younger guy, you look at that like, oh, that's what I need to do to be at the top of the game. That's what I do. That's what I need to do to get respect, right? Which is actually ironic. You're showing a lack of respect is how you get respect.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the mafia respect, you know, like all those mafia movies. The guy said, "Yeah, you should respect," but the guy who doesn't respect nobody's saying that, you know.
Exactly.
And then, like in UFC, you have so many good people to promote. Damian Stipe was a great guy. He still work with the firefighters. Rose, Namayunis, you know, it's a bunch of good people that you could promote. And then I understand trash talk sells and stuff is a character, but why you just want one character? Why not have the other ones? And then those guys are legit. They are who they are. You know, they are nice people. You know, they don't trash talk you and to the point that you want to fight them, and then they go and start try to hug you and say, no, man, that's just for the cameras. Fuck, man.
Yeah.
Tell me what you think about me. I tell you what I think about you. You know, like don't bullshit me.
Exactly. You know, like to me, one of the guys that I think it was iconic for his persona was Mike Tyson. But it wasn't a persona. That was Mike.
That was him. It was genuine. Yeah.
It was genuine. You know, that's
Yeah.
why he terrified people. You know, it wasn't an act. You know, the guy.
It's like Vanderlei. You know, I remember like Tito Ortiz once told me years ago that the only time in his life he was scared of fighting someone was when Vanderlei looked him in the eye and like across, you know, and just like started doing a little hand thing that he did, you know. And that was like Tito told me like the only time in my life that I was actually scared of another man, because I realized that that guy was a true psycho and he was ready to kill me in there if he had to, and he wasn't faking it.
Yeah.
You know? But Comprido, let me ask you this before I let you go. I know you're busy, tons of stuff going on, but let me ask you this. If you had dictatorial powers, I'm giving you all the powers in the world, right? You
I will
are the
force you to
king, a
shave.
true king of jiu-jitsu, and you have the power to change everything. You got your green hair going, and you're sitting on this high throne, and you can change the rules, you can change people, you can change how people look at it. You can make jiu-jitsu any way you want. What would you do?
Man, I just wish the the man, and then that's weird coming from me because you know that I always being a strategist. I always try to pick the way that I could win. But I wish the jiu-jitsu become a little bit more all around, you know, because what happened today, it's not just that, but what happened today a lot is people pull guard and they will not even sweep you if they don't think they can land on your back, you know. And I liked, and then we always like the pass, right? So maybe that's the way it's supposed to be. But I think I like to make people to learn side control attack, side control defense, and how to pass guard. You know, because what happened is two skinny guys, the little guys, they pull each other's guard, and then the guy on top really is not trying to pass. He's just trying to defend himself and find a way to disengage and pull guard. You know, that's what I would change a little bit, but that's a strategy. You know, And I understand why the things happen the way they are. And then the only way to change that is when some group of dominant passers show up on the light divisions and start to passing everybody guard, and then there's going to be fashion and everybody going to start to pass the guard the way those guys do, because we have pretty good guys passing guard. Leandro doesn't even stay in the 50-50, Bochecha pass guard really well. They fight to be standing, but I think it has to happen on the lower belts.
Yeah, I agree. So that's a small change, Comprido. I thought you were going to revolutionize the sport way more than that.
Man. No, I think the rules always can be improved. Is the stuff that I don't like, that I don't think is supposed to work the way it is. But I think they work, I don't know if you are on the group. I assume you are. When they change the rules, they send us stuff for us to review and to give our opinion, And I think that's important, to have the input of the coaches and the fighters, but the rules cannot be, and that is something that I like on IBJJF. They don't do stuff just to make the fight the fights more exciting, but also to protect the athletes. In some cases, it's overprotection, but I've been in cases that training with a friend of ours who is tetraplegic, in a training for something that today would be illegal. So when I was training with Feijão many years ago, he shoot a single leg and with the head outside, and then when I sit and throw him, he ended falling on his head and then broken his neck, and then he's in a wheelchair, and then like as a wrestler, you might thinking, man, but who cares about shooting with the head outside? We suplex people and stuff. But man, I guess some stuff marked me really deep. This is steroid stuff. I saw the guy died in front of me for use of steroids. So the other drugs, I saw people wasting their lives. Like Robert knows where I live. I live in a building in Brazil that has a bar. Okay, right in front. So to go to my house, I have to walk inside the bar, in front of the bar. There's no way. And then I saw so much people wasting their whole life over there. People who were there when I was walking out and when I walked back in. And since I was a little boy, and some of these people still alive over there, but most of them died. Mostly for complications in that.
Yeah.
And Robert, one day the guy go to Gabriel Cardoso. Gabriel Cardoso is one of the best competitors from my generation, lower belts, purple, brown belt. So he's a very good friend of mine, and I don't drink much. I almost never drink, especially when I was young. And then Gabriel was talking with this friend of his, and he said, Comprido, man, this guy is really tough, man. And man, I tell you, he has to be super tough because I see him drinking every day. And then Gabriel said, what? I said, yeah. He's always on the door of the bar, And Gabriel said, no, he lives there, Because every time I walk, it's somebody that I know. And then I stop a little bit and talk. So it's no way. Until this day, sometimes I'm going home or I'm leaving and I saw like some people already drunk that know me, that will slow me down for 15 minutes. And sometimes I try to hide myself to go on my house, but it's impossible sometimes, when I go visit my mom. And then when I do that, in 2 minutes, the interphone rings, and then somebody, hey, come here. We know you're in home. Come here. Let's take a beer. I said, dude, I don't drink. Okay, just come outside,
Yeah, I got a few friends like that, at least a few, But anyway, Dave, you want to ask anything else, man? Anything else you want to add?
No, I was just gonna comment on what you were saying at the end there with the rules. I can appreciate like how traumatizing that can be. Like if you're a training accident with somebody that you care about, and they get paralyzed. We've been close to having that once. I had one of my students who got suplexed and landed right on her neck, couldn't feel her toes, and it looked really bad. Fortunately, she was able to make a recovery, and she's now fighting, still. Wow. But there was like a day where the doctor
So
said,
please tell me, is another girl suplexing her?
it wasn't.
Fuck.
So, fuck.
Did you guys beat him up?
It was a total accident, like the way it went down. Like it didn't. It was just a combination of bad things that happened. The guy was a really nice guy. He felt
No,
devastated.
I bet.
Yeah,
It's
but I mean, there were a lot of people that wanted to kick his ass. Right? but she made a recovery. But after that, it always makes you question things about how you do things. Like I know we had once the one that people always ban, the leg scissors, right?
Yeah.
And it was weird because we were doing that technique for years. Nothing ever happened. And then in the span of 2 weeks, 2 people broke their legs. And I'm like, what the hell? But at that point, we're like, you know what? No more leg scissors. Like it's just, I don't know what happened where suddenly the technique became super fatal, but like it was just too much, And but for competition, I don't know. For training, I get it. I try to be more conservative for training. Especially now. Like I don't want people getting hurt in training. That's not the time to get hurt. In competition, I vary. On an amateur, I don't mind where rules are more restrictive. It makes sense. These are not professional athletes. On a professional athlete, I feel like they're grown-ups. They can make their own decision on what rule set they want to fight under. I guess I don't know now. Like when I was a fighter, I wish there was less rules. I want to be able to do the headbutts. I want to be able to kick people when they're down and all that stuff. I think it makes a very big change on the strategy of fighting. But I don't know, but I'm not fighting now. I don't know what fighters now think. Maybe they have a different mind about it. They're like, you know what? I don't want to get soccer kicked when I'm on my fours. And okay, I guess, it's you're the guys fighting now, so they get to make I would hope they would have a say in what rules they're playing in.
Yeah, I'm not convinced a soccer kick is any harder than a head kick that someone's been, training for their whole lives. I think that the power behind it might be the same, if not even the head kick be even harder, right? When they're standing. So I'm not convinced one is harder than the other.
Yeah,
I think a kick standing is harder than
unless
the guy is already done.
They're prepared.
But if he's already done, the referee should be stopping the fight, not letting the guy kick.
Right. I think those type of things like make a big difference, like the downed kicks, because you see a lot of people when they get in trouble, they go on their fours, they cover up. Well, you can't hit the back of the head, and you can't really kick or knee on the head. Now you have to play a submission game more, or expect the ref to stop the fight when you're hitting him on the sides. Even though you're not really, you might not be hurting him as much. And it kind of makes less jiu-jitsu in the match too, right? If you were allowed to soccer kick somebody when they're on their fours, you wouldn't stay on your fours because I'm in a dangerous spot. I would instead pull guard, right? Because that's what people did traditionally. Like I wouldn't go into a jiu-jitsu match and go, oh, take my back from the beginning. Like I would never do that. But in fighting, people will do that. So I think little rules like that make a huge impact on how the strategy of a fight would go down. So I don't know.
Yeah, you're always going to adjust to whatever rules are presented to you. If they say, okay, you cannot punch with your right hand, your power hand going to be your left.
Yeah.
No questions about it. You're going to train so much that your left hand going to be super strong, And this for every single sport, And that's why I don't like so much in jiu-jitsu nowadays. Every single organization tries to do something that, oh yeah, we do IBJJF rules, but we do not allow double pull. We do IBJJF rules, but we do not give advantage. We do IBJJF rules, but we allow heel hooks. We do IBJJF rules, but we allow neck cranks. So every single rule of the single one of those rules have a reason to be there. And then if you cannot even write your own rules, dude, for the sport, it's much easier when it's just one set of rules, at least a main set of rules. But in jiu-jitsu, is so much stuff outside of that, and then change, even like Metamorphosis rules, submission only. It's a completely different fight.
Yeah.
When I fought Saulo, in a moment there, he passed and mount me, right? So I'm not saying that he could never pass my guard or could never mount me, but if we are having that fight in a IBJJF tournament or in a tournament that it did not give that I have to submit to him or get a draw, I will never go for a bicep slicer in the guy who have the arm so short like him.
Yeah.
But because it's submission only, and then it will not cost me nothing. If I miss the submission, then I went for a bad submission, and then the guy ending passing and mounting.
Yeah.
But I will not ever do that. Makes no sense to attack a guy like that with that attack. And then the rules play a big role in how the fight gonna take place.
Yeah, and then people would try to compare that. Well, if this was an IBJJF thing, he would have lost. But like you said, then I wouldn't have done that, right? So it's
exactly.
It's not an apples to apples comparison. It's two different rule sets. And I think the more these rules split, I know Robert, you've said this a bunch of times, like with now the Eddie Bravo type rule sets. You have athletes now that they're used to training so specialized in one niche that they can't cross over to another one because they're totally unprepared for it, right? So I think for me, I always like seeing the purest form of fighting, So when we have to me, when you have something where the rules are so niche, they start moving away from the realism of fighting. To me, it takes away the appeal, right? Like I find for MMA, the down kicks to me is a huge pull away because it changes a lot of how the fight would be played. So when people specialize in that, I feel like when they actually go in a street fight or something, they might prepare themselves poorly, thinking, "Oh, this is a safe place." No, it's a really bad spot. So I don't know, that's my take on it.
I have a story about Carson Grace fighting an MMA fight. And then at that time, they used to fight on the stadiums, and then he ended fighting a place that the floor is concrete,
Oof.
So turns out that the guy put him down. So he earlier have understood that it's a concrete, and then he could hurt the guy using the floor, right? So when he got down, he kicked the knee to the guy backwards, so his leg scratch his knee scratch on the floor. The guy position again, he kick again, he come back, he kick again. The guy had to stop the fight. So if you're thinking about today, you're allowed to do that, but it will not do any difference kicking the knee of somebody inside the octagon. But if then you are talking about the street, and then the guy is with his knees on the asphalt or on the concrete, so then you could hurt somebody just kicking the knee in that way, So things take shapes in different circumstances, Sometimes you think, this is irrelevant. I'm never going to be able to use that. And then there's a circumstance that's applicable,
That's pretty clever. The one I've seen in the old Valetudo, I forgot who did it. They were fighting on the ropes, and the guy's head was sticking in between the ropes, and he grabbed the rope and wrapped it around the guy's neck and choked him with it. I was like, dude, that's insane. But I think kicking the guy in the concrete, dragging his knees, that's pretty smart. I would have probably not thought of that.
Yeah. I've heard once, I don't know if this is true or not, but the knee on belly position, that's not a judo position. In judo, they don't teach knee on belly, right? So where did knee on belly come from? And old Valetudo days, because they were always fighting, if not on concrete, like on a hard surface, a very good position to do damage from would be a knee on belly. Because if you put your knees on concrete, it hurts. So you put a knee on belly so you can drop some bombs, right? So I don't know if this is right. I have no way of verifying this, but the knee on belly would have come from an MMA tradition and not from judo.
And then, look, that's the thing. I sometimes I talk with friends from old school, and they said, "Oh yeah, because we get 3 points. It used to be 3 points for knee on the belly. It's 3 points of knee on the belly because you can drop a bunch of bombs on the face of the guy." But what happened is, last time you see somebody put the knee on the belly on the MMA?
No, you don't.
Doesn't happen.
I'm referring to a period where the level was nowhere near where the UFC is.
Yeah,
back
exactly.
in the day, people that don't know how to shrimp and bridge and like get off the bottom, a knee on belly against someone who's clueless is what I'm saying. Knee on belly is a dominant position. If they know this much wrestling or jiu-jitsu,
then today the problem is on the rules. They damage the knee on the belly because before, when we start, you have to put the knee across the belly of the guy. It used to be shin on the belly, not knee. You have to put your whole leg there. Now you can put just the tip of your knee on the side of the guy, and then knee on the belly becomes just a tool to score 2 points or advantage. So it's a complement of the pass, the guard passing. You pass the guard, and you go for the knee on the belly. You're either going to get one advantage or you're going to get 2 points, but you don't have to commit with the knee on the belly. So if you're not if you're in a position that you're just there for the points and really not trying to attack, you're never going to be good enough to be able to pull that into in an MMA fight or into develop from that point. Because what was created on the knee on the belly 20 years ago, 30 years ago, is the same thing that people do from the knee on the belly today. What new technique you saw from the knee on the belly recently?
Yeah.
I cannot think about
the least
nothing.
points scored in jiu-jitsu. Out of all points scored in jiu-jitsu, the one that is scored the least amount of times is knee on belly, which speaks volumes about how efficient it really is. I just think it's interesting. It's the one position that doesn't come from judo. It's the one position that we teach in Brazilian jiu-jitsu that doesn't find its origins in judo. Everything else can be found in judo.
Yeah, so I guess we did create something.
That is the conclusion. The only thing Brazilians created was the neon belly. Everything else we stole.
The only technique we don't use.
All right, guys, I really gotta go, man. I got another call here blowing up. I got some other commitments, but Comprido, you're not only a role model, you're a legend in the sport. You're a good friend. Thank you so much for giving us your time. I'm sure we will do this again at some point. And you are welcome to join the ADCC Masters Club here in Las Vegas. Currently, it's me and David Avalan. Lovato said he's going to show up at some point, too. We got a Masters Club going on here in Vegas. You're more than welcome to join.
Masters of old people or masters as wise people?
Oh, old people. We're far from
wise. Okay.
Like
then I can be part of that wise. Group.
We're just old.
If it's the wise, I have to refuse myself.
One last thing, Comprido. Let people know where they can find you online if they want to follow you, or if there's anything you want to plug.
Sure. You can find me at Comprido BJJ in pretty much all the social media. I'm in Chicago or in Bloomingdale. I'm 40 minutes away from Chicago. If you guys are in the area, please stop by. I hope next year I come back. Me and Felipe Costa, we always have our Brazilian Black Belt camp that we've been doing for so many years. I not even like to think for how long we've been doing that, because that makes me feel very old. And I have a channel on YouTube that nobody watches my videos. I have it's just me and my mom watching those videos. So if you guys one day are doing nothing, put Comprido BJJ on YouTube. You're gonna see a channel. You're probably gonna be one of the first people to ever saw that technique. Nobody likes it.
We'll make sure to tune in. Thank you, Comprido. And
take care, guys. Be good.
Awesome. Love you guys. Yeah, thank you. Ciao.